Everybody. We are here at South Florida Integrative Health Center. We want today to go over how we are helping people with these foundational wellness systems in the body that really can be optimized to prevent chronic disease and to be proactive in your health. And that is what we are going to discuss today, the foundations of wellness that we are doing here at the Integrative Health Center, that many functional medicine practitioners that I communicate with throughout the day, throughout the week, they are all doing very similar labs. But each one of us really has our unique way of putting together a unique way of testing and putting together a program to optimize health. So here at South Florida Integrative Health Center, we know that vitamins and minerals and nutrients are essential. So we test red blood cell magnesium and zinc. There are some enzymes like alkaline phosphatase, which is a simple liver test that can really show us nutrient deficiencies. In this case, it's zinc. So you see, there are ways that you can do simple blood tests, but when you look at these blood tests with a different eye, a functional medicine perspective, where first of all, we're not looking at just the range, whether a person is out of the range looking for disease, but we're looking at trends, whether a person, their numbers are getting higher or lower in time, or they're at the top of the range or the low end of the range, and we're noticing patterns. And that's an important thing that we do here in functional medicines, and look at certain patterns. Are there markers of inflammation, and does that pattern show on the blood tests? So what's important to test for, especially in this day and age, is why is there inflammation, or is there inflammation? Markers such as C-reactive protein and other markers like ferritin, which is normally for checking iron levels, but when it's elevated can give us a clue when we're looking at the whole picture if there's inflammation. And inflammation is inflammaging, which is a term that we use in functional medicine that talks about and discusses this low-grade inflammation that contributes to chronic disease. It's not the acute states of inflammation where modern medicine and conventional medicine excels. It's chronic inflammation which contributes to these chronic diseases that are increasing in our population. So we really want to see what is causing inflammation, but first of all, testing for inflammation. Now, endothelial, which means the inner lining of our arteries, that can be inflamed as well. And that is what is this process known as arteriosclerosis, which is this beginning of heart disease, obstruction of the arteries. And we can look much more than a typical lipid panel, which is cholesterol, HDL, and LDL, by looking at the lipoprotein, the size of the particles and the number. Very, very important to see whether the cholesterol is becoming the more problematic types of cholesterol. And then we again look at patterns to see if there's also inflammation, and there are small number of these small particles or a large number of these small particles. Well, then we see a pattern that we can be then preventative and proactive in this process of what would seemingly be the beginning stage of heart disease. And when we pick up on this very advanced cardiovascular test that checks for lipoprotein size and number, the density of this fat particle is what's really important, and the size of it, and if it's in a large quantity, that is what you want to know, not just the standard labs that are tested, which are typically calculated. When you see an LDL, that's a calculated LDL. What you want to know is exactly that particle size and number. So that's cardiovascular. When it comes to metabolic function, what you want to know also is not just fasting glucose, but fasting insulin, and that balance between cortisol levels in the morning, insulin levels fasting and early in the morning, and glucose levels. That really gives us a much better perspective, much better clues, and metabolically how a person is functioning. And then there's markers such as uric acid and homocysteine, which again lets us know different types of inflammation. With uric acid, it could be certain nutrients, certain foods such as fructose. With homocysteine, it could again be certain nutrients such as folate and vitamin B12, choline, and other nutrients that can really contribute to more elevated levels of homocysteine. These are all very important to optimize these foundational markers of wellness. When you can optimize them, and when you're ahead of the game, you can typically use food as medicine. You could use nutrients, amino acids, and different herbal products that could really help with levels of inflammation. But knowing is the first step, and that's what's so important. And that's what we are doing here in functional medicine here at South Florida Integrative Health Center. The main foundation, though, is the gut. And we really love these advanced gut microbiome tests that really go over the different species that we're seeing in the research that are either problematic, like we see with autoimmune disease, higher levels of Prevotella. We have a sample test here that I could show you that they breaks down these autoimmune types of bacteria. So some of them are Klebsiella, Prevotella. And if these are increased in number, so it's not only the quantity, it is the quantity and the types of species of bacteria. Also, certain bacteria can be inflammatory, and you want to know if there's an overgrowth of those types of bacteria, not just that they exist in the gut, because quite often we have this diversity of bacteria, but when they're overgrown, they can become inflammatory, as shown in this sample test, or autoimmune producing if their quantity is very high, like it says here in the red. We also want to look for candida or different fungus or yeast. We want to look for protozoa or different parasites, but we want to know if it's over. We want to know the number, and we want to know if they're there. And this DNA PCR testing that has been available for the last few years is amazing when it comes to the microbiome, because now we can see the species that are causing issues like autoimmune causing or inflammation that can cause a leaky gut. But we also want to know we have the beneficial bacteria. For example, we look at bacteria such as Akkermansia and fecal bacterium, and we want to know that there's a sufficient quantity. So it's very important to get certain species accounted for and to know their number. And the test that we use also goes over the intestinal health, which is, are there sufficient enzymes? Is the immune system of the gut sufficient, or is it in a weakened state? That's the secretory IgA. That shows the immune system of the gut. We also use a marker of inflammation of the gut known as calprotectin. We're also showing markers here on this test of anti-gliadin IgA, which is an antibody, an autoimmune antibody that would be reactant to a protein in grains such as wheat, rye, and barley. And we really need to know if the gut is reacting to that protein. And that's another marker that's so important on this stool test. So putting it all together, you get these foundations of wellness. And of course, food is medicine. And each person's diet is different based on their fasting insulin, fasting cortisol, based on their thyroid function, their adrenal function, and based on hormones. We do markers such as leptin and adiponectin. That lets us know whether the body can burn fat as energy or has a problem with that, and also whether a person tends to have cravings for carbohydrates. That's very important, and we can measure that through certain hormones such as leptin and adiponectin. So these are some of the foundations of wellness, and we appreciate you all tuning in. And if you like it, please share it and let me know what you think in the comments. And everyone have a healthy, happy day.